Imagine Burkina Faso, a country in West Africa, where the sun shines bright, but shadows of injustice sometimes lurk. In this land lived Ibrahim Traoré, a strong and determined leader. He wasn't just any leader. He cared deeply about his people and believed everyone deserved fairness. Traoré knew being a leader meant more than just giving orders. It meant protecting the weak, listening to the unheard, and fighting for what was right. He had a kind heart, but also a will of steel. He wouldn't let anything stand in the way of making his country a better place for all. He heard whispers about Koa Prison, a place where people were supposed to pay for their mistakes, but instead, they faced even more suffering. These whispers troubled Traoré. He knew he had to do something, but what? He couldn't just rely on what others told him. He needed to see the truth for himself. This led him to make a daring decision, one that would put his own life at risk for the sake of justice. The stories about Koa Prison were like dark clouds gathering on the horizon. People whispered about the terrible things that happened behind its tall walls. They spoke of prisoners not getting enough food, of guards who were mean and unfair, and of punishments that were too harsh. Some even said that innocent people were being locked up. These stories reached Traoré's ears, and they weighed heavily on his heart. He couldn't ignore the possibility that such cruelty was happening in his country. As a leader, he felt responsible for the well-being of everyone, even those who had made mistakes. He knew he couldn't just dismiss the rumors as gossip. He needed solid proof. But how could he get it? Sending investigators might not work. The guards could hide the truth, and the prisoners might be too scared to speak up. Traoré realized he needed a way to see Koa Prison with his own eyes, to experience it firsthand. He needed to understand the problem completely before he could find a solution. Traoré spent many nights thinking, pacing back and forth in his office. How could he possibly get inside Koa Prison without anyone knowing who he really was? That's when the idea struck him. He would disguise himself as a prisoner. It was a risky plan, full of danger, but Traoré knew it was the only way to uncover the truth. He couldn't just walk in. He needed a believable identity. He decided to become Moussa Dio, a common name, a simple man accused of a minor crime. He worked with his most trusted advisors to create Moussa's backstory, making sure every detail was perfect. They even found old clothes to make him look the part. Traoré knew he had to change not just his appearance, but also his mannerisms. He practiced walking and talking differently, trying to become someone else entirely. This was more than just a disguise. It was a complete transformation. He was ready to become Moussa Dio and face the unknown dangers of Koa Prison. The day arrived when Ibrahim Traoré, now Moussa Dio, was taken to Koa Prison. The heavy iron gates loomed before him, a dark and forbidding entrance to a world of uncertainty. With a deep breath, he stepped inside. The first thing that hit him was the smell, a mix of sweat, dirt, and despair. The prison yard was crowded with men, their faces etched with sadness and hopelessness. The air was thick with the sounds of coughing, murmuring, and the clanging of metal. Moussa was led to a small, dirty cell that he would share with many other prisoners. The walls were stained, and the floor was covered in grime. There was barely enough room to lie down. As he looked around, Moussa saw the suffering in the eyes of his fellow inmates. He knew immediately that the rumors he had heard were true, and perhaps even worse. The reality of Koa Prison was even more horrifying than he had imagined. Days turned into weeks, and Moussa experienced the daily life of a prisoner. Food was scarce and tasteless, barely enough to keep them alive. Many prisoners were sick, but medical care was almost non-existent. Moussa saw men weakened by hunger and disease, their bodies and spirits broken. The guards were often cruel, shouting insults and sometimes using violence for no reason. Moussa witnessed prisoners being beaten for minor offenses, their cries echoing through the prison walls. He also noticed that some prisoners received special treatment, getting extra food or being spared from hard labor. It was clear that money could buy favors, even in Koa Prison. Moussa tried to help his fellow inmates whenever he could, sharing his meager rations and offering words of comfort. He listened to their stories, learning about their lives and the circumstances that had led them to prison. he discovered that many were not hardened criminals, but ordinary people who had made mistakes or been caught in unfortunate situations. This made him even more determined to expose the truth and bring about change. One day, Musa overheard a conversation between two guards. They were talking about how they were getting rich by selling the prisoners' food on the black market and pocketing the money. They laughed about how the prisoners were too weak to complain. Musa also saw guards accepting bribes from families who wanted to visit their loved ones or get them better treatment. The guard would demand money in exchange for small favors, taking advantage of the prisoners' desperation. He learned that some guards were even involved in smuggling drugs and other illegal items into the prison, making even more money at the expense of the prisoners' well-being. The corruption was widespread, infecting every level of the prison system. It was clear that some guards saw the prisoners not as human beings, but as a source of income, to be exploited for their own personal gain. Musa was disgusted by what he saw. The guards, who were supposed to uphold the law, were breaking it themselves. One night, Musa was wrongly accused of stealing food. Despite his protests, the guards dragged him to a dark and isolated room. The room was cold and damp, with strange metal instruments hanging on the walls. Musa knew instantly that this was a torture room. Two guards forced him onto a wooden bench and began to question him harshly. When he insisted he was innocent, they started to inflict pain. They used the metal instruments to beat him, causing excruciating pain. Musa cried out, begging them to stop, but they showed no mercy. He endured hours of torture, his body bruised and bleeding. He felt his strength fading, his spirit broken. In that moment of despair, Musa wondered if he would survive. But even as he suffered, he knew he couldn't give up. He had to endure, not just for himself, but for all the other prisoners who were suffering in silence. The pain was unbearable, but his determination to expose the truth was even stronger. After the torture, Musa was thrown back into his cell, his body aching and his spirit wounded. He lay on the cold floor, barely conscious. The other prisoners looked at him with pity and concern. They knew what had happened, and they knew there was nothing they could do to help. The next morning, Musa summoned the warden. He stood tall, despite his injuries, and looked the warden straight in the eye. In a clear, strong voice, he said, "I am not Musa Dio. I am Ibrahim Traoré, the leader of this country." The warden's face turned pale with shock and disbelief. He couldn't believe that the prisoner he had been mistreating was actually the president of Burkina Faso. For a moment, he was speechless. Then, fear washed over him as he realized the consequences of his actions. He stammered, trying to apologize, but Traoré cut him off. "You will answer for what you have done here," he said, his voice filled with righteous anger. "The suffering in this prison ends today." As if on cue, the prison gates burst open, and a group of soldiers loyal to Traoré stormed into the prison yard. They were his personal guard, men he trusted with his life. They quickly took control of the situation, disarming the corrupt guards and securing the prison. The prisoners watched in amazement as the soldiers rounded up the warden and the other abusive guards. They cheered and applauded, finally seeing hope after so much despair. Traoré emerged from the warden's office, his face grim but determined. He addressed the prisoners, his voice echoing through the yard. "I have seen the injustice and cruelty that has been happening here," he said. "Those responsible will be held accountable for their actions. But this prison, as it is, will no longer exist. It is a place of suffering, and it must be changed." He then announced that Koa Prison would be shut down immediately. The news of Koa Prison's closure spread like wildfire throughout Burkina Faso. People were amazed and inspired by Traoré's courage and his commitment to justice. Many had lost hope in the system, but his actions showed them that change was possible. Traoré knew that simply closing the prison wasn't enough. He had to create something better, something that would help people turn their lives around. He gathered experts in education, therapy, and job training. He wanted to create a place where prisoners could learn new skills, heal from their past traumas, and prepare for a better future. He didn't want revenge. He wanted rehabilitation. He envisioned a place where mistakes could be corrected and lives could be transformed. He understood that punishing people was not enough. They also needed opportunities to grow and become productive members of society. The closure of Koa was not the end, but the beginning of a new chapter. The old prison buildings were torn down, replaced by bright, airy classrooms, workshops, and counseling centers. Doctors and nurses provided medical care and therapy to help the former prisoners heal from their physical and emotional wounds. Teachers offered classes in reading, writing, and math, giving them the basic skills they needed to succeed. Skilled tradespeople taught them valuable job skills, such as carpentry, farming, and tailoring. The former prisoners worked hard, eager to learn and rebuild their lives. They formed a community, supporting each other and encouraging each other to stay on the right path. Traoré visited the rehabilitation center often, talking to the former prisoners and offering them words of encouragement. He wanted them to know that he believed in them and that they deserved a second chance. He saw the transformation happening before his eyes as broken men and women began to find hope and purpose again. The rehabilitation center became a symbol of Traoré's vision for a more just and compassionate society. Traoré believed in justice, but not in the kind that only sought revenge. He felt that simply punishing wrongdoers was not enough. True justice, he believed, meant giving people a chance to change, to learn from their mistakes, and to become better versions of themselves. He often said that vengeance only created more pain and suffering, perpetuating a cycle of violence. Instead, he wanted to break that cycle by offering hope and opportunity. He wanted to show the world that even those who had made terrible mistakes could still contribute to society in a positive way. Traoré's approach was not always popular. Some people thought he was being too soft on criminals. They wanted harsher punishments and longer prison sentences. But Traoré remained steadfast in his belief that rehabilitation was the key to creating a more just and peaceful society. He was determined to prove that his approach could work and that it was possible to transform even the most hardened criminals into productive, law-abiding citizens. His focus was always on building a better future, not dwelling on the past. The transformed Koa Prison became a beacon of hope for all of Burkina Faso. It showed that even the most broken places could be healed, and that even the most lost individuals could find their way back to the light. People from all over the country came to visit the rehabilitation center to see the amazing work that was being done there. They saw former prisoners learning new skills, working together, and building a better future for themselves and their families. They heard stories of transformation and redemption, of lives turned around and futures reclaimed. The rehabilitation center became a symbol of what was possible when people chose compassion over cruelty and when they believed in the power of second chances. It inspired other communities to create similar programs, to help those who had fallen on hard times, and to build a more just and equitable society for all. The center stood as a testament to Traoré's courage, his vision, and his unwavering commitment to justice. Ibrahim Traoré's actions at Koa Prison sparked a wave of reform throughout Burkina Faso's penal system. Other prisons began to adopt similar rehabilitation programs, focusing on education, job training, and mental health support. Guards were retrained to treat prisoners with respect and dignity, and corruption was rooted out. The government invested in improving prison conditions, providing better food, medical care, and living spaces. The emphasis shifted from punishment to rehabilitation, with the goal of helping prisoners become productive members of society upon their release. Traoré's courage in going undercover and his commitment to justice inspired a new generation of leaders in Burkina Faso. They learned that true leadership meant putting the needs of the people first, even when it meant taking risks and challenging the status quo. His story became a legend, told and retold throughout the country, a reminder that one person can make a difference in the world. His legacy lived on, shaping the future of Burkina Faso for generations to come. And so, the story of Ibrahim Traoré and Koa Prison became a powerful lesson for everyone. It showed that even in the darkest of times, hope can prevail. It demonstrated that one person, with courage and determination, can stand up against injustice and make a real difference in the lives of others. Traoré's willingness to risk his own safety to uncover the truth, his compassion for the suffering prisoners, and his unwavering commitment to rehabilitation over vengeance transformed not only a prison, but an entire nation. His story reminds us that true leadership is not about power or privilege, but about serving others and fighting for what is right. It is a story about the importance of empathy, of understanding the struggles of those less fortunate, and of believing in the potential for change within every human being. The tale of Ibrahim Traoré and Koa Prison continues to inspire people around the world to strive for a more just and compassionate world, one act of courage and kindness at a time. Remember, even small acts can create big changes.